What's up, everybody, and welcome to the Bitcoin Daily Show. I'm Dante Cook, head of Swan Business. Today is a special day for me as I'm up here at Lake James or Crooked Lake in Angola, Indiana, because it's a day where me and some members from our church come up to review, reflect, and remember all of the things that happened in the past year and look to the future as to what things we think are going to happen in the next year. And for those of you who don't know, today is the Bitcoin Halving Day. It's a special day that happens every 4 years where the supply issuance of Bitcoin gets cut in half. And it represents a unique time because all of the people on the Bitcoin network in the world celebrate simultaneously at the same time, regardless of where they are globally. So in Bitcoin terms, every epoch or every 4 years, we get a chance to review, remember, and reflect, and also pontificate on what the future will hold for Bitcoin over the next 4 years. So that's exactly what we're going to do today. So strap in. You probably won't believe all of the things that have happened over the last 4 years. On March 11, 2020, the World Health Organization declared a global pandemic because of the COVID-19 virus. And that changed everybody's lives everywhere, globally. And just a few days later, Bitcoin's price famously fell 39% in one day, from $7,900 to $4,800. Just 2 months after that, on May 11th, Bitcoin had its third halving, which decreased the supply issuance from 12.5 Bitcoin per block to 6.25 Bitcoin per block. And on that day, the price of Bitcoin was $8,800 per coin. On August 12, 2020, business intelligence firm MicroStrategy made history, adding Bitcoin to its corporate balance sheet and adding $250 million worth, or buying over 21,000 Bitcoin, or 0.01% of the Bitcoin network on that day. And Michael Saylor went from an obscure person in the Bitcoin community to the person who's single-handedly been the most outspoken and the best enterprise salesman, leading Bitcoin into a new institutional adoption phase that we hadn't anticipated. In November of 2020, just a few months later, the world saw its first usable prototype of a decentralized social media when Nostr first launched, signaling that there's more use cases for Bitcoin than just a store of value. And by the end of the year, all of the haters were proved wrong, as Bitcoin made an all-time high of $29,000, surpassing the previous all-time high of just $20,000. 2021 started off with a bang, as Tesla bought $1.5 billion worth of Bitcoin, or 10% of its overall corporate treasury. That momentum spurred the price of Bitcoin to a new all-time high of $64,500 per coin. But just after that, we went from the mountaintop to a new low, as China banned Bitcoin and over 50% of the global hash rate went to Russia, Kazakhstan, and the United States, who ultimately became the global leader in the Bitcoin hash rate wars. Because of that, the price of Bitcoin fell 50% down to $32,000 per coin. But hope was just around the corner. On June 5th, President Bukele of El Salvador announced that they would make Bitcoin legal tender in El Salvador, and on June 8th, signed it into law for the entire country. Just a few months later, in November of 2021, Taproot made its softroot. Again, another controversial thing in the Bitcoin community, but was successfully implemented and changed the way that people thought about implementing new things into the protocol. Now, on to 2022, the year of the scandal and war and conflict brewing around the world. In February of 2022, the Ukraine-Russia conflict began to brew, and that stirred fear and panic in global markets everywhere, including Bitcoin. In April, Bitcoin miner Core Scientific, which happened to be one of the largest at the time, began to show weaknesses as it sold all of the Bitcoin in order to cover the cash issues that it had on its balance sheet. In May, fireworks ensued in the crypto world as the Luna Ponzi was uncovered, Voyager and Celsius began to collapse, and the Three Arrows Capital saga had just begun to uncover itself as the fraud and Ponzi scheme that it was. This caused a ton of people to get lettuce hands, like Tesla, who sold 75% of its Bitcoin position at that point in time. In September of that year, Ethereum famously switched from a proof of work protocol to the proof of stake protocol and began making up their own universe in their own world. Well, I guess in their own minds they did. November was a wild month. As Core Scientific filed for bankruptcy, CZ said that he was going to start selling his FTT tokens, Swan Bitcoin announced and launched its inaugural conference, the Pacific Bitcoin Festival, and FTX collapsed. In the midst of all of that craziness, Bitcoin's price was at $16,000 when people like Peter Zeihan said that it was going to zero. That marked the bottom of the bear market. But signs of weakness and collapse weren't just in the Bitcoin and crypto market. In March of 2023, the global financial system saw one of its largest collapses since the 2008 financial crisis, with Silicon Valley Bank collapsing for not having the collateral when there was a run on the bank. The Fed implemented silent QE by implementing the Bank Term Funding Program, which allowed banks like Silicon Valley Bank to receive par value for their underwater assets. In a move that it has to be regretting, the Fed auctioned off its Silk Road coins. And Elizabeth Warren somehow was elected and became the de facto leader of the anti-crypto army in Washington. CZ then stepped down from Binance later that month as he was accused for over billions of dollars in fraud. Silicon Valley tech giant Balaji made a $1 million bet in May that Bitcoin's price would reach $1 million per coin in just 90 days. Later that month, the SEC sued Binance and Coinbase, which began the dialogue and the debate about whether these exchanges were offering unregistered securities, which we know that they are. In July, RIP to the famous bird that we all knew and loved, Twitter rebranded to X. But Bitcoiners didn't change the way that they use Twitter. They were still crazy on it. In August, some semblance of justice was served as Sam Bankman-Fried finally went to jail. And with the crypto market collapse and calamity starting to clear, Bitcoin's price began to rise accordingly as it ended the year just over $42,000. And people like Michael Saylor and MicroStrategy were vindicated as MicroStrategy showed a $2 billion profit. This is hard to believe that this was just a few months ago and was actually the genesis of this show that we're watching today. The spot Bitcoin ETFs were approved on January 10th, and on January 11th, they started trading. Through the first quarter, these Bitcoin ETFs amassed and accumulated over $15 billion of funds through Wall Street firms like BlackRock and Fidelity, who have been the most two successful ETF launches of all time. Larry Fink, CEO of BlackRock, single-handedly turned from Bitcoin's biggest critic to Bitcoin's biggest fan and Bitcoin's biggest proponent, as it is the single reason that BlackRock has been profitable this quarter, amassing about 80% of their fees and their fund flows. So, what changed over the 4 years or the last epoch in Bitcoin? Yeah, there were a lot more investors, a lot more hash rate securing the network. There are a lot more wallet addresses, and about 70% of the overall network is not selling. There's been institutional adoption. There have been crypto casino collapses. There have been global wars and calamities that have been beginning to start and starting to brew. But the network itself has remained undeterred. It creates a new block roughly every 10 minutes, and anyone and everyone continues to have access to this global asset. And in just a few hours, it will become the most scarce monetary asset in the world, above gold, with an inflation rate of less than 1% per year, because its supply issuance will go down to 3.125 Bitcoin per block mined. Looking to the future and looking at the next 4 years, it's impossible to predict what's going to happen in the world. U.S. federal government interest payments surpass $1 trillion. Interest rates remain at 20-year highs, and U.S. fiscal irresponsibility seems to be bipartisan in that it doesn't matter whether there's Republicans or Democrats in office. Our government cannot sustainably run its functions and operations without spending more money than it's taking in. The dollar continues to be a wrecking ball for other currencies across the world, and inflation continues to be more persistent and more sticky than anyone thought. Life continues to get more bleak and more hopeless and more expensive for the average and everyday person in a lot of places across the world. But yet, even still, there seems to be a small niche group of people who think that the world will be better, that there will be more hope, that there will be more optimism, that there will be more fairness, there will be more justice, there will be more freedom. Although imperfectly expressed, this group of people try to share their desire for a better future and their concern for the world on Twitter and on platforms and other places, and again, imperfectly, but in a position of love, of I want the best for you, and I want the best for us, the collective us, our neighborhoods, our communities, our countries. That's the one thing that I enjoy about the group of men that I'm meeting here with today at this lake, that we come to remember and to reflect and to remind ourselves of a better hope and a better future. But it's one thing that I also love about interacting with all of you people globally who watch the Bitcoin Daily Show, who email me at daily@swanbitcoin.com asking questions about their future or how they can have a better life for their children or their family, or remove themselves from a situation of poverty to a situation of privilege. I see your stories, I hear your stories, and I see the desire of the place where you want to go. Just remember, that's the thing that you ultimately want. You desire the freedom to choose, the freedom to have hope in a desperate situation. And for those of you who don't have that currently, I hope that you get that. I hope that you sense that when you interact with people wearing crazy hoodies like this. I hope that you get that when you watch the Bitcoin Daily Show. I hope that you can be a company like Swan, who's just exiting our first Epoch, but is the type of startup company that has 170 employees, but has 15 babies on the way, because we're optimistic about tomorrow and are willing to invest despite what they may see around them in the current moment, in the present circumstance. So yeah, you're going to see a lot of tweets out there about how the price of Bitcoin on the first halving was $12. And at the second halving, it was $650. And the third halving, it was $8,800. And today, this fourth halving is probably going to be somewhere around $63,000. And there's going to be a lot of pontification about what it will be in 2028 or after the next 210,000 blocks. But that's not the most important thing. The most important thing through the price, through all of these events and the craziness that will happen, is how much will you change? What are you going to decide? What are you going to start doing differently this next 4 years that you didn't do the last 4 years? I challenge you to think about it. I challenge you, even if you can't get out on a lake like this and on a day like this, to remember, to reflect, to review, and to hope, and to think about what comes next. And so with that, we're signing off for today. I'm Dante Cook with Swan.com. Happy stacking and happy having.